We are witnessing the collapse of the Harry and Meghan project in real time.
Harry and Meghan have actively been trying to replicate the very life that they had supposedly walked away from.
She kept wanting to take over. She said to the Queen that, she ought to actually use her rather than Catherine because she's worked a lot more and she's self-made.
Look at the amount of disrespect this would be to William. Because that is his mother as well. Meghan does not care about her connection to this family. If you are in close proximity, she is going to steal it to help herself.
So William can do this, and there's absolutely nothing Harry can do about it. He was always very angry about it. He was always very hurt about it. But I don't think he ever understood that that is the way you play this game.
She had come there with a plan to take Harry with her out of the house and actually hate all his family.
A lot of positivity coming out of the Duchy of Cornwall too, not just Prince William. We're understanding he's going to sell this land. His intention is to pop up some additional spaces and homes for people. So we're getting a lot of undeniably positive attention for Prince William.
Most people think this story is about Meghan Markle leaving the royal family. Others think it's about the interviews, the Netflix deal, the podcast, the book, the endless headlines. But according to discussions online, some critics think the real story started much earlier than any of that. Before the interviews, before California, before Oprah, before Spare, before the public war. There was an expectation. And according to commentary discussed in the uploaded material, critics online believe everything that happened afterward may have grown from that one expectation. Because for years, people have asked the wrong question. They keep asking, why did Meghan become unhappy? But according to critics online, the more important question may be, what was she expecting to find in the first place? That became the controversy. Because according to discussions presented in the uploaded material, a claim attributed to a former palace staff member has recently gained renewed attention. A simple line. A line that critics online think explains far more than people realize. According to the commentary discussed in the uploaded material, the claim was, she expected a billionaire. She got a millionaire. Now importantly, this is a reported claim discussed in commentary. It is not an established fact. Nobody can know exactly what Meghan expected. Nobody can know exactly what she thought privately. That context matters. But according to many viewers online, critics online think the reason this quote exploded is because it offers a completely different explanation for everything that followed. That became the shift. Because if critics are wrong, then the last 6 years are a story about misunderstanding. But if critics are right, then the last 6 years are a story about disappointment. And those are two very different stories. Then another observation spread. People started saying something interesting. Most outsiders see royalty and imagine unlimited wealth. Palaces, jewels, titles, security, power, private estates. A life beyond imagination. But according to discussions online, critics increasingly argue that the royal family doesn't actually work the way most people think it does. That became another major conversation. Because according to commentary discussed in the uploaded material, Prince Harry and Prince William were never standing in the same position. They were standing in the same photograph, but not the same future. And suddenly, people started looking back differently. Different houses, different responsibilities, different expectations. Different destinies. That observation spread quickly. Then another uncomfortable realization appeared. People started asking, what happens when someone enters an institution believing one thing and discovers something completely different? That became controversial. Because according to critics online, disappointment changes behavior. Disappointment changes priorities. Disappointment changes relationships. And sometimes, according to critics online, it changes everything. Then another difficult theory appeared. Critics online started saying maybe the public has spent years focusing on the symptoms. The interviews, the accusations, the projects, the documentaries, the public battles. while completely ignoring the possible starting point. Expectation. That observation spread quickly, because according to many viewers online, critics online increasingly believe this story isn't really about what Meghan gained. It's about what some people believe she discovered she wasn't going to get. And if that's true, then the entire Harry and Meghan saga may look very different than people originally thought. Because according to critics online, the biggest question may not be why everything fell apart. The biggest question may be whether the disappointment started almost immediately, and whether everything that followed was simply the consequence of that realization. According to many viewers online, this is where the conversation became much bigger than wealth. Because critics online believe something unusual happened. People heard the number and missed the point. That became the controversy. Because according to discussions presented in the uploaded material, the claim that Meghan supposedly expected something very different financially immediately grabbed attention. But critics online argue the money itself isn't the story. The expectation is. That became the shift. Now importantly, the uploaded material contains commentary, anonymous sourcing, opinion, and interpretation. Nobody outside Meghan herself can know exactly what she expected. Nobody can verify private assumptions. That context matters. But according to many viewers online, critics online argued something else. People often confuse royalty with unlimited personal wealth. That became symbolic. Because according to discussions online, many outsiders see castles, ceremonies, and titles and assume everyone inside the institution has access to the same life. But according to critics online, the hierarchy matters. And it matters a lot. Then another observation spread. People started saying something interesting. Harry and William grew up together. Same mother. Same father. Same public image. Same family. But not the same future. That observation spread quickly. Because according to commentary discussed in the uploaded material, William was always the heir. And being the heir changes everything. That became another major conversation. Then another difficult realization appeared. People started asking something uncomfortable. What if the public spent years treating William and Harry like equals, when the institution never did? That became controversial. Because according to critics online, the monarchy isn't designed around equality. It's designed around succession. And succession creates winners and supporting players. That observation spread quickly. Then another difficult theory appeared. Critics online started saying maybe this is where disappointment entered the story. Not because Harry wasn't wealthy. $20 million is still enormous wealth by normal standards. But because according to critics online, expectation is relative. And relative comparisons create frustration. That became symbolic. Because according to discussions online, people increasingly started comparing the two brothers. Not who had more money, who had more future. That became the conversation. William inherits. William represents continuity. William becomes king. William receives assets tied directly to the institution. Harry doesn't. That difference suddenly looked much larger than people realized. That observation spread quickly. Then another uncomfortable realization appeared. People started saying something difficult. Maybe the issue was never what Harry had. Maybe the issue was seeing what William would eventually have. That became another major debate. Because according to critics online, comparison changes perception. Something can feel abundant until it's standing next to something bigger. That observation spread quickly. Then another observation spread. People started looking back at later events differently. The interviews, the complaints, the frustrations, the comparisons. Again, none of that proves motive. But according to critics online, people increasingly started wondering whether disappointment arrived much earlier than the public realized. That became controversial. Because according to discussions presented in the uploaded material, critics online increasingly believe the story people watched publicly may have started privately long before anyone knew there was a problem. Supporters pushed back. Because disappointment alone doesn't explain 6 years of conflict. That's fair. But critics online responded. What if disappointment wasn't the ending? What if it was the beginning? That became another major conversation. And according to many viewers online, That may be why this quote suddenly exploded online. Not because people care about the number itself, but because critics online think it may explain why expectations and reality appeared to collide almost immediately after Meghan entered royal life. According to many viewers online, this is where the conversation became much more uncomfortable. Because critics online believe something shifted. People stopped looking at Harry and started looking at William. That became the controversy. Because according to discussions presented in the uploaded material, public commentary increasingly focused on something many outsiders never fully understood. The most important person in Harry's royal life wasn't Charles. It was William. That became the shift. Now importantly, the uploaded material contains commentary, anonymous sourcing, opinion, and interpretation. Claims about private motivations, private feelings, or private interactions are not established facts. That context matters. But according to many viewers online, critics online argued something else. William represented everything Harry could never become. That became symbolic. Because according to discussions online, William wasn't just Harry's brother. William was the future king, the future head of the institution, the future holder of responsibilities Harry would never inherit. That observation spread quickly. Then another difficult realization appeared. People started asking something uncomfortable. What happens when two people grow up in the same world, but discover they were never heading toward the same destination? That became controversial. Because according to critics online, one brother was always moving toward the center. The other was always moving toward the edge. That observation spread quickly. Then another observation spread. According to commentary discussed in the uploaded material, public discussion increasingly focused on reported tensions involving William. Not because William publicly commented. In fact, that became part of the story. He didn't. That became another major conversation. Because according to critics online, William's silence became more noticeable with every interview, documentary, podcast, and book release. That observation spread quickly. Harry spoke. William didn't. Harry explained. William didn't. Harry responded. William didn't. And critics online increasingly started asking, why? Then another difficult theory appeared. Critics online started saying maybe William understood something earlier than everyone else. Not about Meghan. Not about Harry. About the institution itself. Because according to discussions online, the monarchy rewards patience more than reaction. That became symbolic. And critics online increasingly argued that every public response would only create another public battle. That observation spread quickly. Then another uncomfortable realization appeared. People started saying something interesting. The public often mistakes silence for weakness, but institutions often treat silence as strength. That became controversial. Because according to many viewers online, critics online increasingly believe William chose not to fight publicly because public fighting would legitimize the conflict itself. Then another observation spread. People started comparing outcomes. Not statements. Outcomes. According to discussions presented in the uploaded material, William continued moving toward larger responsibilities, larger projects, larger visibility, larger influence, while Harry and Meghan increasingly built projects outside the institution. That contrast became symbolic. Because critics online increasingly viewed it as two completely different approaches to power. One inherited, one recreated. That observation spread quickly. Then another difficult realization appeared. People started asking something uncomfortable. What if the real rivalry was never between Meghan and Catherine? What if critics online believe it was always about position? That became another major conversation. Because according to discussions online, people increasingly started viewing many later conflicts through a new lens. Not personality. Hierarchy. That observation spread quickly. Supporters pushed back. Because no outsider can know exactly what anyone was thinking privately. That's fair. But critics online responded. If hierarchy wasn't important, why does it keep appearing in almost every discussion about Harry and Meghan's departure? That became another major debate. And according to many viewers online, that may be why the story suddenly became much bigger than money. Because critics online increasingly think the real issue wasn't what Harry had. It was what William represented. And once people started looking at the story through that lens, many of the events that followed began to look very different. According to many viewers online, this is where the conversation stopped being about money and started becoming about comparison. That became the controversy. Because according to discussions presented in the uploaded material, critics online increasingly argue that the public spent years focusing on conflict while missing something else entirely. Competition. Or at least, the perception of competition. That became the shift. Now importantly, the uploaded material contains commentary, anonymous sourcing, opinion, and interpretation. Claims about private intentions, private motivations, or personal rivalries are not established facts. Nobody outside the people involved can know exactly what they felt. That context matters. But according to many viewers online, critics online argued something else. The public didn't create the comparisons. The institution did. That became symbolic. Because according to discussions online, the moment Meghan entered royal life, comparisons became unavoidable. 2 couples, 2 princes, 2 women, 1 future queen, 1 not. That observation spread quickly. Then another difficult realization appeared. People started asking something uncomfortable. How do you avoid comparison when the entire structure is built around hierarchy? That became controversial. Because according to critics online, Catherine already occupied the position Meghan could never occupy. That observation spread quickly. Then another observation spread. According to commentary discussed in the uploaded material, public discussion increasingly focused on similarities people believed they noticed. Clothing, appearances, projects, public imagery. Again, observation is not proof. Similarity is not evidence of motive. That context matters. But according to critics online, people increasingly started interpreting patterns as intentional. That became another major conversation. Then another difficult theory appeared. Critics online started saying maybe the problem wasn't Catherine herself. Maybe the problem was what Catherine represented. That became symbolic. Because according to discussions online, Catherine represented permanence, security, future status, future influence, future visibility. And critics online increasingly argue that visibility is often more powerful than money. That observation spread quickly. Then another uncomfortable realization appeared. People started saying something interesting. Money can be earned. Influence can be built. But certain positions can't be acquired. They can only be inherited. That became controversial. Because according to many viewers online, critics online increasingly believe that's the detail many people underestimate when discussing royal life. The institution has limits, and those limits don't move. That observation spread quickly. Then another observation spread. People started looking back at later events differently. The interviews, the public complaints, the frustrations, the comparisons. Again, none of those prove motive. But according to critics online, people increasingly started to interpret them through the lens of status rather than personality. That became another major conversation. Then another difficult realization appeared. People started asking something uncomfortable. What if critics online are wrong about rivalry, but right about disappointment? That became controversial. Because according to discussions online, someone doesn't need to dislike another person to dislike the system that favors them. That observation spread quickly. Then another difficult theory appeared. Critics online started saying maybe that's why Catherine became such a central figure in public discussion. Not because she created conflict, but because her existence constantly reminded people how the hierarchy worked. That became symbolic. Because according to many viewers online, critics online increasingly believe the institution itself may have been the real source of frustration all along. Supporters pushed back. Because Catherine rarely speaks publicly about these disputes. That's fair. But critics online responded. If the conflict was never personal, why does the comparison keep returning year after year? That became another major debate. And according to many viewers online, that may be why the story suddenly became much bigger than Harry, Meghan, or even William. Because critics online increasingly think the real battle was always between expectation and reality. And nowhere was that reality more visible than in the woman who already occupied the position Meghan could never have. According to many viewers online, this is where the conversation became much less about personalities and much more about the monarchy itself. Because critics online believe something important gets missed every time this story is discussed. People talk about Harry. People talk about Meghan. People talk about William. People talk about Catherine. But according to critics online, the most powerful character in the entire story isn't a person. It's the institution. That became the controversy. Because according to discussions presented in the uploaded material, many critics increasingly argue that the royal family survives for one reason. It changes slowly, sometimes painfully slowly, but it rarely changes because one person wants it to. That became the shift. Now importantly, the uploaded material contains commentary, anonymous sourcing, opinion, and interpretation. Claims about private motives, expectations, or decisions are not established facts. Nobody outside the individuals involved can know exactly what they wanted. That context matters. But according to many viewers online, critics online argued something else. The institution was always going to win. That became symbolic. Because according to discussions online, people increasingly started looking back at the first years of Harry and Meghan's marriage differently. Not as a battle between people, as a battle between expectations and tradition. That observation spread quickly. Then another difficult realization appeared. People started asking something uncomfortable. How many people have entered that family believing they could modernize it? That became controversial. Because according to critics online, the monarchy has outlasted politicians, prime ministers, governments, wars, scandals, generations. That observation spread quickly. And critics online increasingly started asking, if the institution survives all of that, why would it suddenly reorganize itself around one new arrival? Then another observation spread. According to commentary discussed in the uploaded material, public discussion increasingly focused on the difference between influence and authority. That became another major conversation. Because critics online argued something important. Being popular isn't the same as being powerful. Being visible isn't the same as controlling outcomes. Being talked about isn't the same as directing the institution. That became symbolic. Then another difficult theory appeared. Critics online started saying maybe this is why William remained so difficult to move. Not because he was fighting publicly, but because he didn't need to. That observation spread quickly. Because according to discussions online, William wasn't defending a position. He already had the position. And according to critics online, people often underestimate how much stability matters inside institutions built on continuity. That became controversial. Then another uncomfortable realization appeared. People started saying something interesting. The public often imagines influence as attention, but institutions often define influence as permanence. That became another major conversation. Because according to critics online, attention comes and goes. Headlines come and go. Podcasts come and go. Books come and go. But succession remains. That observation spread quickly. Then another observation spread. People started comparing outcomes again. Not interviews. Not statements. Outcomes. According to discussions presented in the uploaded material, while public attention repeatedly shifted toward controversy, William's responsibilities continued expanding. His role continued growing. His position continued strengthening. That became symbolic. Because according to many viewers online, critics online increasingly believe the institution quietly answered the debate without ever speaking directly. Then another difficult realization appeared. People started asking something uncomfortable. What if critics online have been looking at the wrong conflict for 6 years? What if the conflict was never Meghan versus Catherine? Never Harry versus William? Never California versus London? What if it was always expectation versus reality? That observation spread quickly. Because according to discussions online, people increasingly started viewing the entire saga through a different lens. Not who won. Not who lost. Who misunderstood the rules. That became controversial. Supporters pushed back. Because every major story has multiple sides. That's fair. But critics online responded. If the institution was always going to stay exactly what it was, how much of this conflict was actually avoidable? That became another major debate. And according to many viewers online, that may be why this story continues generating discussion years later. Because critics online increasingly believe the biggest shock wasn't discovering who Harry was, or who William was, or who Meghan was. It was discovering that the monarchy was exactly what it had always been. And that reality may have been far different from what some people expected when the story first began. At this point, audiences online seem completely divided. Some people believe Meghan entered royal life with genuine intentions and simply discovered an institution that wasn't prepared to adapt. Others believe the expectations were unrealistic from the very beginning. Some people think the story is about personality. Others think it's about hierarchy. Some think it's about family conflict. Others think it's about disappointment. And then there's the biggest question of all. Do you think the problems began after Harry and Meghan joined royal life? Or do you think the problems began the moment expectations collided with reality? Drop your thoughts in the comments. And if you enjoy deep dives into royal controversies, media narratives, public perception, and the stories people are still debating years later, make sure to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications. Because according to many viewers online, the most important part of this story may not be what happened afterward. It may be what some critics believe was discovered at the very beginning.